Welcome to part 3. In this section, we will be talking about a person's interpretation of the sensory experience. We will try to solve the mystery of who the experiencer is and what is being experienced. So previously, we discussed that sensory experiences, sensory objects, and the 5 aggregates are dependently arising and passing phenomena. Then this begs the question, who is the experiencer and what is being experienced? Something doesn't seem to be right. If all entities are dependently arising and passing phenomena, why do we have the impression of a self that exists over time, that also experiences a world that exists over time? How can this happen? So there is an architect or a builder. This is mental formations. So this is another aspect of mental formations that we will discuss, as I told you in a previous section. So in the context of a builder, mental formations have the job of preparing. What do they prepare? They prepare all the 5 aggregates from moment to moment. The aggregate of form or materiality, the aggregate of feeling, the aggregate of perception, the aggregate of mental formations, and the aggregate of consciousness. And where does the information for these preparations come from? Well, the information seems to be intrinsically embedded in the mental formations because mental formations are linked to the results of previously committed actions by body, speech, and mind. So the preparations could be favorable or unfavorable depending on which results are coming forward to provide the information. But this is not a hopeless situation because this is a dynamic process, always in a state of constant flux. We have the ability to override what is embedded in this information system. Why? Because mental formations also prepare your current intentional bodily actions, speech, and thoughts. It is the karma maker. So if you think of this as a gardening process, if a gardener plants seeds that are going to bear sweet fruits, he will get sweet fruits. If he plants seeds that are going to bear bitter fruits, he will get bitter fruits. So you can leverage this activity of mental formations to override what is already embedded in the information system. Now we must remember here that not everything in our life is tied to karma or the results of previously committed actions. For example, if you think about your material body, it is dependent on the food that we eat, and it can be impacted by seasonal conditions such as rain, winds, snow, and so on. And our bodies are also influenced by the genes that we have inherited from our parents. So these are some other factors that play a role in our experiences and in our life. What I wanted to say was not everything is run by karma. And we will talk a little bit more about mental formations and its role in the bigger picture that we'll talk about when we discuss the 12-factor formula of dependent arising. All right, so there is an architect and there is also a magician. Who is the magician? It's consciousness. So whatever is being prepared by mental formations, consciousness makes real. So if you think of mental formations as the director of the movie that is your world, then consciousness projects it. Now consciousness is a real magician because it creates a perception of space and time. Thus, it creates a depth perception. So, with the activity of consciousness, what happens is there is an illusion of a self and a world out there that the self is experiencing because of this depth perception. And also the illusion that the self exists over time and the world that is out there also exists over time. We will also talk more about consciousness in the next section when we talk in detail about the 12-factored formula of dependent arising. Now, I would like to use an optical illusion once again to convey to you that the sensory objects that we experience are interpretations that arise in our mind. So when you see this picture, some of you will say that this is a picture of a parrot. And some of you will say that this is a picture of a lady painted as a parrot. So there is some interaction between these color components in materiality and consciousness and mentality materiality. So consciousness comes in and creates a depth perception. So this depth perception now creates an illusion of you and an external object. It creates a subject-object duality. So what happens is we see that there's a separation between the observer and what is being observed. All right. Now you might come across this interaction between mentality, materiality, and consciousness being referred to as a whirlpool or a vortex, where everything is spun into some whirlpool that creates this subject-object duality. So there is an invariable interaction between mentality, materiality, and consciousness. And this interaction, this reciprocal activity, creates this illusion of a subject-object duality. And as we discussed earlier, the five aggregates are not only the person, but also the person's world, because the sensory object also arises with the interaction of mentality, materiality, and consciousness in this reciprocal dependency. All right, so let's try to figure out how the mind interprets this naturally occurring process, this phenomena that are dependently arising and passing. So we have the dependently arising and passing phenomena, that is the process of the five aggregates, and the mind mistakenly interprets the process of the five aggregates that are dependently arising and passing phenomena into a self that is surrounded by a world. So this misinterpretation is an apparent reality that we live in. In this apparent reality, we have this subject-object duality. So our world is a mind-interpreted world where the mind mistakenly interprets a naturally occurring process to be a self and a world that surrounds the self. So what is the reason for this? The Buddha said, ignorance is the reason for this. Now, ignorance here does not mean that you are not educated or that you are not qualified, but it means that you do not know things as they really are. And Buddha said, use the word avijja for this. So in the presence of ignorance, the activity of mental formations and consciousness is interpreted as a being and a world around the being, which the being mistakenly takes to be me and my world. The sense of self, which is a notion, arises from moment to moment. When there is ignorance, we don't see the five aggregates as they really are. This brings us to the end of part 3, where we discussed mental formations as the architect, consciousness as the magician, and the arising of the sense of self and a world around the self from moment to moment. I hope you will join me for part 4. Thank you.